My funny Valentine, sweet comic Valentine, you make me smile with my heart. You look so laughable. Unphotographable, yet you are my favorite work of art. Is your figure less than good? Is your mouth when you open but don't change it for me. Not if you really care for me. Stay, little Valentine. Stay. Stay and make each day a Valentine's but don't change it for me. Not if you really care for me. Stay, little Valentine. Stay. Stay and make each day a Valentine's Day.
Hi, guys. Welcome to the most self indulgent, most insufferable late show on this earth, on this little corner of YouTube. You're listening to my funny Valentine and Chet Baker's rendition. We didn't get enough of it last night, so I said, what the hell? Let's just go. I love that it ended with that applause because we do have something to celebrate tonight. Huge achievement for little fish such as myself, for a little fly like me. I have cracked 1,000 followers on Instagram earned, not given. No one in the watch community supported me at all. No one, obviously, in our little corner of this universe, has given me a hand or promoted my content. I didn't buy any followers. Every single spammer who said DM this, DM that, let us promote you in exchange of money, I not only deleted their messages but reported them and banned them and all their accounts, blocked them from my page, and I still made it. I still reached the small fry amount of 1,000 followers on Instagram. A lot of it was, of course, due to your help. I know a lot of people who listen to this show on a regular basis are actually following me on Instagram as well. It means a lot to me. It shows us once again the power of community. When you have just a tiny group of people who are committed to what you do, who want to support with what little they have, with whatever means they have, whether it's just a simple double tap and like, or some sort of contribution, it makes a huge difference, and I'm so grateful for it. No, to this day, I am the only true independent in this space. I don't have any sponsors. I don't have any investors. I don't have any corporates behind me, and I'm here, and I did it. I did it myself. I did it my way, and I achieved it with your support. So here's a drink for you all. Cheers. And we're going to talk about independent watchmaking today, but I thought I might as well ease myself into the conversation, since there were a few things that I was thinking throughout the day. And for me, Instagram is that platform that I use to warm up, in a way, that I use to rehearse some of these ideas, that I used to flesh them out also in writing. So you may have come across this. This was really funny for me, because after I posted it, the Audemars Piguet CEO actually added me, and liked the post and everything. And I'm not sure if he has read what I have written in the actual post, but it was really funny. I think he thought that I was praising him, but to me, this particular box, the 5 gorgeous Habano cigars you are seeing there, pretty much tell me what the brand has become. Right? It's an institution. It's a house that has been caught up in its own hype. This is a watchmaker, guys. Set your priorities straight. I know that it was always in the tradition of Swiss watchmaking and luxury goods in particular to reward your customers, your best and most loyal customers, with special gifts. That's great, but don't get high on your own supply and forget what you're actually supposed to do, especially when you have multiple boutiques and establishments that are allegedly under federal investigation for all sorts of scandals and fraud when it comes to watch allocations. So it's funny to me that they would be more invested in collaborating with Coiba, and who doesn't like a nice Cuban cigar, than finding new ways, making new designs that are not as uninspired and uninspiring as the Code 1159. Putting something original out there rather than double branding and double banding cigars. I'm not going to say much more, but I'm glad I have among those 1,000 plus followers, François-Henri Benamias. Welcome, sir. It's nice to have met you. But here we are with our first topic of discussion today. This is the Breguet Type 20, which was a reproduction of the civilian model that Breguet sold through the decades. This is the rendition they had for the Only Watch charity auction that is held under the patronage of Prince Albert II from Monaco. And it's usually conducted by Christie's in Geneva, if I'm not mistaken. At least that was the case with the 2021 edition. And this watch sold for a record price at the time, at least for a Breguet Type 20. And you can already see the appeal, right? The quite well-balanced two-register classic chronograph with syringe hands, nicely sized Arabic numerals, the classic big eye at 3 o'clock that traditionally served as a 15-minute counter, but here it's same as the modern edition, a 30-minute counter. And it's a watch that kind of comes with ready-made patina, right? Which blends quite well, doesn't look in bad taste. Honestly, I think it's a great reflection. I like this one a little better than 2019, and one of the reasons that I liked it and that I liked both of those watches, which were reproductions of the Type 20 as they were traditionally made, was because they stayed true to form. They preserved the mil-spec slash neo-vintage case rather than styling it in the way that Breguet did in the mid-90s revival. They also were powered by movements built on a Valjoux base, which was really attractive to me, at least as an idea, because that's how the big eye, the 3-register, mil-spec, civilian, most of the Breguet Type 20s were built on the base of a Valjoux movement. So it was, I think, historically very inspiring, very inspired, great reproduction. And you remember we talked about the 3-year product cycles, right? So there's a great expectation these days, especially after the Type 20 has been discontinued with the no-date version Aéronaval going by the wayside in 2018, and with the Transatlantique, which is a little bit different and has a date window at 6, again being discontinued in 2020. There is an expectation that perhaps next year, if not by the end of this year, we might see some movement from Breguet's side in bringing back a Type 20 into the lineup. And I'm usually encouraged not by the rumors, and we keep hearing all sorts of rumors that are not really based on anything more than anecdote or hearsay. But I'm actually encouraged by the whole fact that they still have a place for the Type 20 in the catalogs and in the online resources, even though there's no model such as Type 20 in the current lineup, right? They have a Type 21, they have a Type 22. They in fact have Type 21 in various different configurations and executed in different kinds of metals, so on and so forth. They don't have a Type 20 but you can actually still find it on the website, which gives me a kind of encouragement that it is a placeholder. It's coming back in some shape or form. And while I was thinking about this, of course, I was reminded by the fact that Type 20 was actually revived around late 1994, 1995 by Breguet when they were still under the stewardship of this Bahraini investment company called Investcore. And this was the company also that integrated earlier in 1992, if I'm not mistaken, the Lemania manufacturer into the body of Breguet, and henceforth they called it Nouvelle Lemania, and that actually became today Breguet's actual manufacturer. Right today, Breguet watches are built; they're made at the manufacturer that had traditionally built Lemania movements. For Omega, for Tissot, for Patek Philippe, for Vacheron Constantin, for all these greats, including some newer independents like Roger Dubuis, uh, Daniel Roth, but also Breguet, of course, right? Breguet itself benefited from Nouvelle Lemania over the years, and they have built a number of different kinds of watches. Nice to see some of the people in the chat. Hawkeye says AP is overrated for sure. Hey, I'm still a huge fan of the brand, and I know its history in terms of horology and design in and out. I would still love to own a mid-size vintage slash neo vintage Royal Oak. I would still like to own that. You know, if I ever catch a break financially, that would in fact be one of the first purchases I make, unless some independent watchmaker steals my heart in the meantime. Because I've always been a fan of that design. I always actually loved how it wore, whether it was on the original integrated bracelet or even a leather band, if not a rubber band. Yeah, I love also all these 80s and 90s classic perpetual calendars built by AP that come in round cases with stepped bezels as well. I kind of love the UTM, especially the chronograph versions, especially the ones that are the two-tone versions of that UTM series. The one that comes in tantalum with pink gold accents. I love a lot about AP, from vintage to present time, even in terms of the actual watches they make. But everything else about the brand gives me a headache, if not something else. I also love like true vintage AP too, but they are built in such limited numbers. They are so rare that everything is so expensive when you go before 70s and 60s with AP. Anyway, that's another conversation altogether. Bob, it's lovely to see you. I think I saw your new acquisition on Instagram. Correct me if I'm wrong, but wear it in good health. I think you did get to overseas after all. So great watch. I know you wanted it. You're happy with it. Enjoy it. Wear it proudly. I'm glad you made your decision and you are enjoying your watch. It is a beautiful piece. Mookie says proof of like. Thank you. Please hit that like button. It really helps. Yes, I did make you your book recommendations in Watch Nicholas's Discord, which if I had a link for invitation, I would, but I think it's a very well vetted establishment. So Mookie is a true VIP in that establishment. You might say he has built it with his own hands. But yes, thank you for being there, Mookie. Thank you for creating that platform, and thank you for sharing these kind words and liking the video. So going back to Breguet. So Breguet over the years made many different kinds of watches using that famous Lemania CH27 base, right? And most of us know Lemania CH27 in its intimate connection to Omega, in its use for the Moonwatch, which was given the name and assembled as Omega 321, and which we can find today in uh, in the modern reproduction of Omega. I think it's a very exciting watch, very intriguing venture. If only it were a little more available. So I will start with just showing you what we did with uh, the same movement, same base. For example, they did a split second chronograph. I will start with the most complicated in a way and kind of work my way back. This was um, the split second chronograph they built, reference 5947, based on the Nouvelle Lemonia CH27 or Lemonia 2320 Eboche. Beautiful two register piece. Um, there you have it on the crown to split the seconds. Of course, you have the regular chronograph pushers and everything else that comes with the package when it comes to Breguet, you know, the frosting for the hours track, the various different um, patterns of hand-guided guilloche work that go into the decoration of the dial. Of course, those beautiful heat-blued hands, um, not to mention the distinctive case shape, the coin edging all around, the teardrop logs. I can go on and on. Of course, the movement itself is beautifully decorated. That wonderful column wheel you see there, which is something, of course, that the modern revival of the Type 20 lacked, right? You remember that um, not only was it an automatic chronograph, and you know, I'm proud to wear it. I'm quite happy with it. I'm not necessarily complaining, but one of the reasons that people sometimes trash Breguet Type 20 in its modern edition is that it's not a column wheel chronograph, right? People keep saying that it's not a column wheel vertical clutch chronograph. Well, you know, here's a base that they have to appease the people who are asking for that. And of course, you can see all the beautiful rubies. The regulator itself is, of course, quite nice. You know, something that is not as aesthetic as you know, Alain Gonzunez swan neck regulator that also has a freehand engraving. It's not at that level, but the movement, the way it's assembled, and the way it's put together, the way it's finished, and the way it's regulated is to a very high standard. And that's one difference it makes, right? You know, I do have my 40s Lemonia CH27 chronograph. And what it lacks is not only hand finishing, right? I'm sure um, the modern rendition of it with the way that Breguet regulates it is, I'm sure, a little more accurate and a little more precise. So not all movement bases make an equal product. It matters how it's assembled. It matters how it's finished, at least aesthetically. It also matters how the movement is regulated in terms of precision and accuracy, and in terms of sometimes shock resistance and absorption. Right? There's a reason, for example, a lot of sports watches by high horology brands have an entire bridge there. So this was the Rattrapante split-second chronograph that Breguet built using the CH27 base. So clearly they're putting that Nouvelle Lemania manufacture to good use. They have also made, of course, a perpetual calendar chronograph using the same base. I didn't have great pictures of this, so hopefully what I found here was a perspective of the movement. Yes, it does. That's great. And you see it has that humanized moon phase, which I like. I'm a huge fan of anthropomorphism when it comes to watches. Obviously, to see a moon phase on a watch face, there's something charming, there's something romantic about it being actually drawn as a human face. Everything, again, you expect from Breguet here, at least 3 different very detailed hand-guided decorations on the dial, the heat blued hands, a leap year indicator, and you have a perpetual calendar chronograph in 5617, if I'm not mistaken. That's right. That is also built on a CH27 base. And there you go. The architecture of the movement is unmistakable. And of course, there's the added module for the perpetual calendar here. And you get a better look at the regulator here as well. And finally, of course, this is one of my favorite watches of all time, actually, the Breguet Classique chronograph of the earlier era. And once again, you see the variety of decorations, the frosted, Breguet frosted hour track on the outside, the Breguet hands, the way they use that snail meter in the middle. It's just, I don't know, I find this watch very beautiful. I think it looks amazing in pink gold especially. And this is also a rendition of the Nouvelle Lemania CH27 or 2320. So what I had in mind, and I'm sorry that it was so circuitous, was why wouldn't Breguet actually use what is essentially an in-house movement for them, right? And again, I don't put a lot of premium on everything being in-house. I value rather a certain kind of transparency. I always am of the opinion that all tasks should be left to experts. But in this case, you can make a case for Lemania being, in fact, the in-house movement for Breguet. They are literally operating out of that house, out of the Nouvelle Lemania manufacture. But more importantly, they are actually utilizing that expertise, that know-how, that technology, that innovation, tradition of innovation and invention, and that architecture that has been perfected over the decades, and that in a way defines horology or simply chronography in the 20th century before Lange's datograph and its L951.1 movement kind of took over the mantle. So I would love Breguet to revive the Type 20 as a hand-wound chronograph, which will preserve the dimensions of the case and immediately make it thinner, right? Because you don't need a rotor. And CH27 is actually a relatively small movement in terms of its dimensions. So that solves basically another complaint that some people bring up for the Type 20, right? It's too thick for a case that size, which is 39 millimeters and change in the diameter. Well, this can help you bring it all the way down to 13 millimeters or less in terms of thickness. So why not bring back the Type 20 for the enthusiasts? What a beautiful way it would be to actually energize a different kind of customer base, which InvestCore did in mid-90s with that particular version of the Breguet Type 20 that I'm proud to wear. People are much more interested and much more intrigued by a hand-wound chronograph movement these days. You don't have to decorate it so lavishly or as lavishly as you decorate in the Classique series. Bring it out in stainless steel. Bring it out with an exhibition case back. Bring it out with a decent enough finish, right? Do it a kind of sapphire sandwich. Use a modern domed sapphire for your crystal. Use another sapphire crystal for the exhibition case back. And you have a beautiful neo-vintage watch that can appeal to devotees of that particular design, as well as a different kind of customer who is geeking out over horology and who is lusting after all these high horological manual chronographs and can't afford them. So give them something that carries the much vaunted mythical name Breguet on the dial, and that is also accessible, and that also takes over the legacy of CH27, right? And they have shown us what kind of pricing it could be, right? If they're asking for the Ed White, for the Omega 321, around what? I think the list price is 13 and a half. Ask 15 for the Breguet version. Why not? I'm sure you won't be short of people who would want to buy it. Victor M, welcome. Watch Nicholas says, upvote, Mookie is here for the game. Well, I mean, unless you're implying, anyway, I'm not going to snitch on myself. I was going to say something, but that's quite all right. Victor M, nice to see you, man. Thank you for being here. And hello, Mr. Viral. Yeah, I know Bob was saying no one's favorite color is brown. I disagree. I love earthy colors. I'm not gonna say my favorite color is brown, but since my favorite color is usually paler and faded shades of blue, I usually end up wearing some shade of brown to go with that, right? If I'm wearing a blue Oxford shirt or a blue striped shirt or a denim shirt or a chambray shirt, and 90% of the time I'm wearing something like that, if not a pink shirt, I end up wearing a pair of khakis, which are invariably some shade of brown, because that's what goes best with it. Banzi's Shoedown says proof of like and for the love of Breguet. Yes, we are a big, big fan club here, including, of course, Watch Nicholas, who is a big fan of the Mariner, if not also the Type 20. So it's great to see you all here. Thank you for being here. So that's how I wanted to start, and I want to shift the gears, since I said a bunch of shit about being truly independent. That wasn't just in the form of self-congratulation. I also wanted to talk today about the value and really, first of all, the definition of an independent brand. And I wanna say, something specific, even as I know that it is a subjective matter, right? It is a matter of personal opinion, right? There's not a single definition of an independent watchmaker, and at the end of the day, collectors who collectors who actually invest, and I mean mostly emotionally, in independent watchmakers, they all have different reasons for it. There's not one way to look at it. And I wouldn't begrudge anyone for disagreeing with my definition. And I know a lot of you know already that my understanding of high horology and independent watchmakers is much broader than the conventional definition. In a way, much more democratic, maybe in a naively idealized way, to the extent that I consider, for example, a brand like Habring 2 as a true independent, and as independent as any of the brands that are usually recited in the same breath as FP Jean, as Uhrwerk, for example, as say Grönefeld. We can Recepi, all these Acrivia also, right? It's the same venture, more or less, different genre of watch. I think Habring would be, independent in the same way. That doesn't mean the watches are just as good, just as exquisite. That's not what I mean. It is about the spirit that a brand represents for me and the approach that they execute in terms of creating their watches. And I want to explain that a little further, because if we just go by the dictionary definition, right, of an independent watchmaker, essentially we have to include in that impossibly broad definition every watchmaker that is not owned by a third party, be that an investment company or a luxury conglomerate. So in fact, from that perspective, 3 out of the big 4, right, and I have in mind, of course, Rolex, Patek Philippe, Audemars Piguet, and Vacheron Constantin, except for Vacheron Constantin, which is owned by Richemont, you are talking about 3 independents, right? So if we go by dictionary definition, basically we have to include independent of size, independent of history, and I'm not trying to pun here, uh, independent of all these different factors, we have to count every single brand that is now not owned by a luxury conglomerate or an investment firm as an independent watchmaker. And I know that people who are passionate about horology don't define independent watchmakers that way. So all of this goes to say that um, there's no objective definition. There's no simple dictionary definition of an independent watchmaker. For me, again, I said something kind of airy and abstract when I was waxing poetic about it's about the spirit in their approach to watchmaking. If we push away that kind of fluff, right? What I mean is precisely this: independent watchmakers can take the kind of challenges and indulge in the kind of experiments that brands like Rolex and Patek Philippe cannot afford. Right? Rolex, we have always said, values gradual evolution at a glacial pace over revolution. We have always mentioned that they are quite predictable in a way, except when they do something that falls a little bit out of the ordinary, which makes people go crazy about it and creates this sort of artificial excitement, right? Think of the new GMT Master 2, quote unquote, the Sprite, that is basically just an inverted rendition of the watch with a different color combination on the bezel. And voila, you suddenly have one of the greatest hits of watches and wonders, right? What other brand can do that? And in terms of Patek Philippe, of course, you have an entire division that's called advanced research. But then again, a lot of what Patek Philippe releases is predictable in the extreme, right? It does appease its own committed fans, and I'm not going to hate on Patek Philippe for having consistently provided, in terms of design over the decades, some of the best examples of beauty in simplicity, especially when it comes to dress watch executions, right? There's nothing to argue there. But again, Patek has become predictable in the same way that Rolex is predictable. All they do at this point, 90% of their releases, it's a different metal, it's a different dial color, and there's not much in the way of innovation that comes to the regular production line that graces the average offering of the company. John Davey says, great information. I'm not used to seeing Watch Talk on what channels? Excellent work. Well, thank you. Thank you, Davey. Thank you, Mr. Davey. That's very kind words. And I can already tell that you have a good sense of humor, because it is an interesting situation, isn't it? That we are not used to seeing actual watch talk on watch channels, and I'm trying my best. And for the most part, again, I have genuine allies in this space, people who are here day in, day out, time after time, who support me in so many different ways. But I don't usually have panel members. I have been arranging some interviews. You have probably seen it, and check it out. I have divided it to playlists as well. The professor is going to come back. He might actually drop by later in this broadcast, but he's busy. The professor is busy doing professorial things. He's busy professing. So hopefully he'll come back soon and we'll talk more. Especially yesterday, I really wanted to have him on because we were talking about how the watch industry has in the past responded to moments of crisis. And I was trying to speculate using my own resources, using my own knowledge to understand how they are reacting today to the coming financial crisis, which has already started showing certain effects, at least in the watch market. Y2K. So good day. Yeah, see, man, I wish, I don't know if you caught the broadcast later because you joined at the end, but we were talking a lot about Singapore, quite incidentally, because of the new Marina Bay Sands boutique that Sincere Fine Watches has opened, the SHH, Sincere High Horology. I hope you visited it, and I hope you can share someday your views, your opinion, your experience at SHH. And thank you, Y2K. Thank you for being here. You know, I'm a big fan of yours, so hopefully you will drop by at some point. Jake Brooks says Sprite has crystal traffic twice a day around 9, no matter which hand it's on. Yeah, I mean it's a long conversation. I don't wanna turn it into Rolex talk today, unless you know my co-pilot Aussie expat is somewhere there and he wants to jump on and help me out. You know, I love Rolex, but I get tired of just talking about Rolex at some point. So let's keep up the independence. Jay Gray says, if I could help bring the Jay Gray, no worries. I wish it were about convincing him. He genuinely doesn't have time because he's busy. He's busy really doing professorial things, as I mentioned. So, right, I just went back to the idea that independent watchmaking doesn't bear a simple definition, right? We can't just use the dictionary definition because that would mean we have to include all these big name brands that are far from independence, minimally because they're weighed down by their own history, by their own tradition, by the established way they have been doing things for decades, if not centuries. And I was saying that really independent watchmaking is appreciated by many because of the originality and singularity they can bring onto the table, because of the kind of challenges they can take, right? I'm not entirely cynical, but I do realize, yes, independent watchmakers are oftentimes embraced by certain collectors because of their exclusivity, right? A lot of collectors like having watches in their collection and wearing watches, especially when they're in the company of other watch collectors, that is entirely different. That is something that no one else has potentially in their own collection, right? We all aspire to that at some level, right? My Lemania Fortis chronograph might not be my most desirable watch, might not be my most expensive watch, far from it. It may well have been my cheapest acquisition, but I'm not going to say anything. But it's the watch that I love wearing because it's something so different that I'm almost sure that I'm not going to see anything like it on someone else's wrist, even when I'm in the company of fellow enthusiasts. In the same way, I don't begrudge the high rolling collector who exclusively buys independents, and in fact the niche kind of models, the most exclusive watches they produce already in a limited number because they want to have something different, something that no one else has, by all means. But I think what the independent watchmakers bring to the table beyond exclusivity is that spirit of experimentation, is that spirit of innovation, right? And I'm going to use one example to demonstrate that, and it's actually quite an efficient one, I have to say. And I'm going to show you the um, Breguet's resonance wristwatch, sorry, pocket watch. And there we are. Um, let's see. I wanna show it to you in the Christie's catalog where it was sold. So Breguet produced the resonance type of pocket watches, but they were precisely that, right? They were pocket watches, which means what? Basically, to use the easiest way of defining it, the resonance watches essentially have two distinct movements that operate in tandem and that basically regulate each other, right? So that they remain synchronized. And that's a logistical problem, right? How do you squeeze two distinct calibers into one package? And for Breguet, that was a challenge. For Abraham Louis Breguet, that was a challenge. But what kind of challenge was it when he was trying to put that into a pocket watch, which was, if my memory serves, 64 millimeters, 63.7 millimeters, right? So Breguet produced a resonance pocket watch and essentially squeezed two watch calibers into a single pocket watch with a 64 millimeter case. Why was it so exciting and so fascinating for F.P. Jean to have done the same thing, right? More than a century later. Well, because he did it in the form of a wristwatch, right? That was 40 millimeters in diameter. So that is the kind of excitement, that is the kind of originality, that's the kind of spirit of experimentation, that's the kind of challenge that I'm talking about, that a non-independent watchmaker perhaps is unable to take, pardon me. But someone like F.P. Jean early on could. Hi, Tim G. Y2K says, I'm always a fan of your work too. Thank you so much. I need to catch up on my watch reading. Just that when you are on, I'm at work in the office. I completely understand, man. Never feel bad. And I'm doing my best to have broadcasts these days, at least, that are no longer than 2 hours. Sometimes I go a little longer, but I'm trying to have everything 1 hour or 2 hours so people can perhaps listen to it later. Jay Gray says, follow your voice Y2K and share it with us. I completely agree. Tim G, nice to see you. So yes, F.P. Jean, everyone raves about F.P. Jean these days. Everyone, I'm sure, well, most everyone would love to get their hands on this model or that. Again, I'm not really crazy about the brand, but I myself wouldn't say no to a couple of different models. I think the Havana dial chronomètre Sovereign, for example. Speaking of brown watches and how no one likes them, Bob, I actually love that watch. I don't know why it's in the thumbnail here, because it leads you to a chronomètre résonance. But let's look at that while. So I'm pretty much, invested in. Um, well, I'm pretty much yearning for something like this if I ever were to go for a jaune, very simple, compared to everything else that he does, perhaps too simplistic. But this is really the kind of watch that I like. Time, three-hander for all intents and purposes. It just has the extra power reserve, decent decoration on the dial, perfect aesthetics, if you ask me. Again, not that I'm particularly chasing it, but if I were, this would be the kind of model. Nevertheless, the thing that got me excited as an enthusiast and as a collector about FP Jaune, the thing that brought them to mainstream attention was the kind of horological innovation that FP Jaune was participating in, right? And FP Jaune himself is, of course, a very astute student of horology, right? He's someone who knows Breguet in and out himself. And he's someone who also followed and studied from afar George Daniels, too. Right? Obviously, he, pardon me, obviously he himself has built his legacy from the ground up, but he has also found kindred spirits, so to speak, who were at times alive or with whom he was corresponding through other means, like Breguet, like George Daniels, and really honed his art over the years, and perhaps found certain hits with simpler watches at the beginning. But the excitement was generated by that spirit of experimentation, by that ability of bringing horological classics in a refreshed, aesthetically pleasing and exciting manner. So that's what I'm going to say in terms of my definition of an independent. An independent is the kind of watchmaker that is, of course, not owned by a luxury conglomerate, but really the kind of watchmaker that is not afraid to take certain kinds of challenges, that's not afraid to show the product the kind of care and attention that it would need, and is not beholden to the interests of stakeholders and investors and a huge and diverse board or committee when taking these sorts of decisions. I'm gonna what does it mean, am I okay? Maybe it's the connection. I guess you're talking about the connection, Jay Gray. Otherwise I'm great. So I want to talk a little bit about Benzinger, starting with Jaeger Benzinger, but before that, I think I'm also running out of battery. I think so. If you would allow me for 1 second. Okay. So let's see. Uh, well, regular viewers know that my internet connection sometimes fails me. Not too severely, I hope, but it does. So this was a venture, and I think they're still continuing this venture that's based in what is going on? Baden-Baden, the German state of Baden-Baden. And it's basically the kind of pooling of resources, perhaps, we were talking about earlier. Jochen Benzinger is himself a huge expert of guilloche decoration and just by and large handwork in watchmaking, right? Where he is trying to make everything by himself and decorate every single component with some sort of artisanship. And if I can't get these pictures working, it won't be worth much, though. So I have to. So this is a watch that they call Edition 3 that I had my eyes on for a long while now, but I just can't get it to work. Yeah, it's strange, guys. So let me see if I can find Edition 3 from some other source. I think there was one listed on Chrono 24, which can be interesting. Edition 3. And in addition to making watches by pure handwork, one of the wonderful things that Benzinger does, which is in a way also a cost-cutting measure, is that they take vintage watch calibers and reassemble it and put it together, hand finish and decorate it, and execute it in ways that are true to the classical tradition of watchmaking. Here, for example, right? We were just talking about Breguet and that particular hour track, right? That is the Breguet frosting, which is a technique that Benzinger himself employs here, right? You see that lovely onion crown. That's not too small. That's not too large. Same thing can be said about the case. I think it's right around 38 millimeter. Excuse me. I think it's around 10 millimeters thick, if I'm not mistaken. That beautiful salmon dial, which has a lot of added dimension because of the beautiful handwork done there with the guilloche, right? This is not in any way the kind of stamping techniques that are sometimes used by bigger brands. And of course, again, in that classical tradition, the hands are so-called palm hands, the apple hands, or the Breguet hands, as we sometimes like to call them. So you have a perfectly balanced dress watch that has some modern elements in stainless steel, of course. You can I think they have a couple of authorized dealers, right? But that doesn't change the fact that all of their watches are made to order and can be ordered in a customized fashion. For example, the movement you can either get gilded or rhodium plated, as is the case here, right? So you can either have it in this case in a way that would reflect the salmon dial, right? Or contrast with it, right? And same thing with the dial. I think you can get it in the rhodium plated version or this particular salmon execution, and I think both are quite beautiful, and it's really a matter of taste, and I quite like the way that this watch is put together, and it's a no nonsense watch, right? It's a great value proposition, right? Where can you get a fully handcrafted watch for less than 4K? And forget about the fully handcrafted watch, but from all these respected brands, can you get a dress watch that looks this beautiful for less than 4K? I don't think those deals are there anymore, right? And the price on their own website, which allows you to customize it, is also 4K in euros, which includes the EU VAT, which means that basically within that field you can do quite a bit of customization without ramping up the price. The case is in fact 38 millimeters in diameter. The thickness is 9.5. You have sapphire crystal in the front, which is rather flat and not domed, right? It's not trying to be something that it isn't, even though it has a certain vintage feel. Those neo-vintage aspects are not necessarily foregrounded. It is a sapphire crystal caseback for the exhibition of the movement. The dial itself is made from silver, right? There are only 4D examples of it ever going to be made. So if you're into exclusivity, you still get it even at this price point. And you can decide again minimally whether you want frosted white dial, a rhodium plated kind of a silvery dial, or a gilded dial in that shade of pink that shows up here as a kind of salmon or copper, right? And you can ask for the same thing for the caliber, which is actually basically a German. I think it's like a whole stock of German pocket watch calibers that they inherited or bought up somewhere, and they assembled it and decorated it. It's a beautiful movement, if you ask me. 17, very old school, right? 17 rubies, 17 jewels, beats at 2.5 hertz, right? 18,000 semi-oscillations per hour. And it has all the perlage and guilloche work. Of course, it's hand wound and has a 2-day power reserve at full charge. All audio and video is fine. It sounded like you were getting choked up. No, I wasn't. But thank you, Jaeger. I know you care, but no reason to worry. Thankfully I'm all good. Baruch Hashem. Jake Brooks says Chronomètre Bleu is one of my favorites. That's a famous one. I can't object. I cannot object. It's not necessarily my favorite, but it is a pretty watch. It is a pretty watch. And it was the first FP Jaune watch that I had ever seen in person. That must have been around 2015 when I had a chance to visit their boutique, or maybe it was even 2014. I think it was 2014, maybe fall, early summer, possibly. Yeah, it is a beautiful watch, and you know, in that, again, in that Sunset boutique, you get so much beautiful natural light. It really gives the best impression of whatever watches they have, which is not a way, again, not a way to you know, throw shade at any of their models, but it's just such a great horological environment that it can make even the cheapest watch look like $1,000,000. So when you have something that has that sort of deep blue dial that shows up in different ways depending on where it catches, from which angle it catches the light, you just have a whole feast, right? Not my favorite, again, necessarily. I think my favorite FP Jaune watch ever is the one they made for the opening of the Beirut boutique. It is a version of the Chronomètre Bleu, and it's a watch that I like, again, in the most unreasonable way, because it militates against more or less everything that I that I ever that I ever liked on a watch. I hate skeletonized executions. Um, I hate this sort of cutout on the dial that's not necessary. But this somehow is amazing. And there were a certain number of watches made in this series. And it's the famous collector, Claude Sfer, who opened that boutique, who is also a close friend of FP Jaune, that were done with Eastern Arabic numbers. So it was even more special and more unique. Again, I said I don't like cutouts, but this sort of arabesque design really captured me. You know, to see the parlage is great. The parlage in juxtaposition with that honeycomb kind of dial. The Biblos name is intriguing to me always. They used the J from I think it was the Phoenician alphabet, they said. So that's a unique touch. Anyways, I just thought that that particular gold they use, the shade of pink gold they use in the movements, just played beautifully for whatever remains of that blue dial after the cutouts. And I would have loved one of these, but I didn't even know the brand, I think, when they first came out. And by the time I started asking around about FP Jaune, both the editions, both the Arabic numeral and the Eastern Arabic numeral edition, which you can see here, had already been sold out. So, but this is my favorite FP Jaune model ever. I think it's a very unique watch and something that I enjoy. And Jay Gray says, made by bees. Hey, if it were made by bees, I wouldn't eat it. So it's made by humans. We can feast our eyes on it. So interesting thing about Benzinger is, of course, in addition to his collaboration with Jaeger, which is still customizable, is still something that is produced more or less made to order, even though you can find, as we just did, there's only one though. You can find some in stock. You can find even this one in on Chrono 24, but it is still quite limited. But Benzinger, in addition to that, does his own watches, and in this case, it is almost exclusively bespoke, more or less, right? It's all made to order or subscription watches. And in this case, he does stray away from traditional design as well, right? And part of that is because it is a kind of venture that is entirely beholden to the customer request, right? Which means that he just, if he can execute it, if he accepts that particular commission, he's just going to do it exactly as the customer wants it. But it's also kind of like, we were just talking about Recep Recepi, right? Recep Recepi does, under his own proper name, watches that are more exemplary of classical taste and traditional watchmaking. And the Akrivia watches are usually a little more adventurous, a little more experimental, right? I hope I'm getting this right, because sometimes I get them confused, but I think this is how he configures those two brand names, those two distinct styles. And you can more or less think the same thing about Jaeger und Benzinger and Benzinger. Jaeger and Benzinger is a little bit more like serial production, even though the production itself is very limited and open to customization. They're based in the village of Baden-Baden in the German Black Forest. So it inspires this sort of aesthetic application to artisanship, which I adore. It's a great vibe. But Benzinger itself is completely beholden to your requests. You can bespeak anything that you want, and Jochen Benzinger will realize it from the ground up. And if you're interested, you can look for some interviews on YouTube that are done with Jochen Benzinger. I think there's one that Chrono 24 did some years back. It is in German, but I think YouTube can do closed caption translations, and they are more or less okay, right? If you're not fluent in German, I don't know, maybe you don't want to listen to it, but for me, it was a lovely experience. Great guy, very enthusiastic, very very much a watchmaker, quite nerdy, but that's the way we like it. That's the way we love it. So I want to show you now the most recent release he had, which actually will kind of tie everything together, because it will bring us back to one of the masters, perhaps one of the biggest proper names, if not the biggest proper name, in watchmaking in the 20th century, which is George Daniels. Because Benzinger just basically introduced its own its first in-house movement. Basically, as I mentioned previously, they sourced movements, especially especially kinds of movements that were inherited from pocket watches at times, and in certain cases also belonged to other watchmakers, but were somehow orphaned for one reason or another. So Benzinger would take them apart, assemble them in his own way, of course, hand finishing every single component and decorating it, even by hand guided guilloche as well. But I think he's kind of taking the next step, stepping outside of that established model. What was I saying yesterday about crisis and watchmakers' responses? He's clearly looking for a different kind of customer, right? He doesn't just want to sell bespoke watches. He doesn't just want to collaborate with Jaeger and make make watches that are more immediately recognizable and absolutely classical. He wants to do something that kind of straddles both worlds, something that has a movement that's exclusive to him, to his brand, and something that he used as an occasion to collaborate with Habring 2, because it was Habring 2 that supplied the movement for him. But it is a movement that he himself skeletonized and decorated, as you can see. A watch that has a quite respectable water resistance for what it is, for a dress watch. A beautiful decoration on the case back, perhaps in a way that is more intricate from the back than it is in the front. And in the front, again, you have something, the kind of different dimensions of guilloche decoration that we have just seen in some of the more recent executions in Breguet. And of course, this watch reminds me absolutely of a watch that George Daniels built. And it is, of course, the so-called anniversary series in its production model. Of course, these are extremely rare watches, right? They're in the stratosphere. Set of 3 basically that went on auction last November, if I'm not mistaken, at Philips, Geneva. And this is the watch that looks most like the new venture of Benzinger. It's the anniversary watch that has the continuous running seconds on a subsidiary dial at 5 o'clock, and at 7 it has a pointer date indicator and a power reserve at 12 o'clock. Of course, when it comes to Benzinger's execution or interpretation, you have again those beautiful guilloche decorations that are very distinctive of him. The case shape is very similar and reminiscent, but ultimately has a kind of angularity that I find more appropriate of this Austro-German venture. The heat blued hands are, as always, a delight, and they are Breguet hands. You can see the elements of Breguet frosting for the hour track, as well as those salmony coppery accents on for both the seconds and the date, and in fact for the hour track as well, for the minute track, I should say. And of course, the places of the subsidiary seconds and the date indicator have been reversed. And I think in a way, it's again one of those examples that you see often in Lange's lineup, in Habring 2's lineup, where you have a watch that's almost perfectly balanced in terms of the design, that almost has this equilibrium on the dial, yet there's something about the watch visually that interrupts that harmony, that breaks up that balance. And in this case, it is this crown, of course. And I think it's really nice. I really like the fact that there is a tiny touch of madness in that rigorous method. I like that they introduced that little bit of chaos into what otherwise seems to be quite orderly. And of course, you have a watch that's pure handwork, that is beautifully finished in terms of its case, in terms of its movement. You know, all these heat blued parts of the movement again, right? It's just, you know, a delight to look at the watch, and I'm sure even more of a delight to hold it. It's a watch that's called Gap 1. I think it stands for like German Austrian project or something like that. Again, it's very conventionally sized, right under 40 millimeters, 39 in fact, which means, especially with those angled lugs, it probably wears beautifully on a lot of different wrist sizes and diameters. Under 12 millimeters, right? 11 and a half. The date correction apparently is operated with a pusher that doubles up as a crown guard, right? So up and down, kind of. And the crown itself is of course what you use to adjust the time. Power reserve of 48 hours with 28,800 semi oscillations per hour, so 4 hertz. It has a shock absorber, Carl sprung balance for chronometer accuracy, 19 joule movement, and Roger Smith certainly has a sense of humor about it. He says it's an interesting dial design. I'm sure he recognizes it from somewhere, as we were just talking about the George Daniels anniversary. And as you know already, Roger W. Smith is Daniels's lifelong student and protege. So if anyone is going to say anything about it, he has a right. But it is nevertheless a beautiful watch, and it is something that is, of course, at a different price point. And another thing that I really value about this kind of independent brand, and I used yesterday Czapek as an example to talk about this, it's the transparency. Right? They recognize that making a watch like this is ultimately a collaborative effort, and it's not something that one brand, much less a single person, can do on their own by pulling themselves up by their bootstraps or something. And here in this message, they recognize Habring 2 for mastering a technically absolutely wonderful hand-wound movement according to Jochen Benzinger's design vision. By the way, he says Gap 1 was chosen for a perfect German-Austrian partnership. Right, it's partnership, not project. My bad. RM Lifestyle from Pforzheim. Pforzheim, by the way, is a big German watchmaking center as well. As it happens, this is Pforzheim is in the west, right? And that's where actually Herr Lange, Walter Lange, took refuge in during the Cold War, and when the two Germanys were separated, and where he still dabbled in some watchmaking in his semi-retirement, right before the 90s. So Pforzheim is also a watchmaking center, much like Glashütte, I want to say, but perhaps not in the same way and not with the same prominence. RM Lifestyle from Pforzheim, who are known for their accurate and perfect inform high-grade steel cases. That's the case maker, including the fluted crown. You see the beautiful decoration there, and a magnificent 3D engraving on the crown. La Pratique in Morteau, France, for a wide range of exquisite watch hands. This is their work. Those are the ones that made the hands. Die Modell from Tauber Bischofsheim, who never cease to surprise us with fine hand-sewn leather straps of all kinds. Great. I have no idea where Tauber Bischofsheim is. That's where my knowledge of German geography fails. Kedor GmbH for providing the blank dials we so urgently need to create all these wonderful handmade dials according to our customers' wishes. So in fact, maybe they can customize the decoration of the dials for you as well if you were to order one of these watches. Last but not least, there is us responsible for all the rest. So they basically they don't make their own dials, but they do certainly finish it by themselves. Just get the blank dials from Kedor GmbH and finish it off. Special warm thank you to Watch David, who always manages to put our watches in the right and perfect light, who is the person who took these photographs, apparently. That's amazing. I want to know how much this will sell for. Let's see. I wonder if, I don't think they have it on their website yet. Maybe I can do a quick search. Jochen Benzinger, GAP 1. I want to venture to say that it's probably around less than 15,000. Oh, nice. Okay, now I realize. That's why Chrono 24 had an interview with him, because they are actually basically serving as a retailer for him. Chrono 24 is basically an authorized dealer for Benzinger. And you see they already have GAP or Gap 1 listed. And it's a fixed price of $12,000, basically, plus shipping. Of course, as Chrono 24 is fond of, I'm sure they will slap on the tax on top of it, and then on the way in, your wonderful countries, selfless government will ask for extra duties and fees at the customs too. But hey, we can't blame Benzinger for all that. The fixed price is 12K. I know haters will say it's George Daniels' anniversary clone. By all means, I invite them to buy directly from Roger Smith. For the rest of us who can't afford Roger Smith watches, for those of us who still value independent watchmaking and are perhaps interested in this sort of work at an accessible price, high horology at an entry level, at a bargain, really. This is the kind of watch that's a very intriguing proposition that is really a value proposition, right? You see here the crown guards, which double up as pushers for the date indicator, right? You can jump the date forwards and backwards using those pushers. And of course, that beautiful fluted crown, which you use to adjust rather the hours and minutes. Oh yeah. This Marco is again presenting his very unique opinion, which I had basically preempted in what I said. Hey, by all means, Marco, you're a salesman and you don't sell Benzinger. So I'm sure if you guys get your hands on it, I'm sure you will not be short of all these great things to say about it. I hope Luxury Bazaar ends up getting one, and I would like to listen. In fact, yeah, let me get a screen capture of this so we can laugh at it together, Marco, when you try to sell one once Luxury Bazaar gets it. Because as you guys know, Marco is a salesman for Luxury Bazaar. And any old watch that comes to his hands, that goes through their system, he lavishes this extensive praise on it. So, and he does great work for that. He's a great salesman. And I'm sure he will make a great job selling a Benzinger watch once Luxury Bazaar has it in stock. But until then, he'll continue to talk shit. That being said, guys, I have probably another half an hour, unless the professor somehow materializes, somehow joins the program. I would love to have him on board quite soon. But I will just remind you to hit the like button if you have been enjoying the presentation, if you have been learning from it. Please hit the like button. I, for one, think that, in fact, a lot of these new brands present the spirit of independent watchmaking in a way that those generic big names can not aspire to anymore, which is lamentable. They will continue to do a mishmash of a number of different things and try to represent it as the new hype watch. By all means, as long as they have people like Marco on their side, I'm sure they will make a quick buck out of it. We won't begrudge them that. But when it comes to the rest of us, we will admire the kind of handwork, the kind of care and attention that goes into each one of these pieces that you can get directly from the watchmaker, more or less, right? You don't even have to use Chrono 24. Just contact Benzinger directly. His website is jochenbenzinger.de for Deutschland, right? And the Instagram, and I'm sure they respond to the DMs as well. Instagram handle should be something rather similar. Right there. All right. Right. With that being said, yes, please hit the like button. If you're just do subscribe. I'm here with Watch Talk every day, right? And I do everything on my own as a true independent. And I'm happy to have all of you on board. Thank you for your presence and support. If you could spread the word, if you can actually share the link, I would genuinely appreciate that. My first goal, again, I'm a little fish. I'm a small fry. I have just reached 1,000 followers, doing everything on my own on my Instagram, having no particular support, having no access to anything corporate whatsoever. And in a similar way, my most immediate goal here is to reach 1,000 subscribers. So please go ahead and send out the link to your friends. Share the content that is already plenty on the channel. And that will help me to get a little bit back for my efforts, for all the time and work I put into this channel. I cannot hit the speed dial on Professor Jaeger because he's probably sleeping. If he's not here, he's sleeping. So we cannot do that. Once again, this is a channel that has pure independence, no financial backing or other material support. I'm not being passive aggressive, Marco. I'm just being outright aggressive because you basically repeated something that I've already said and didn't add anything to the conversation. Instead of saying whack release, which is just incredibly lazy approach, right? Have you said anything about how the watch is actually made, where the components come from? Can you judge for our viewers what the quality of the cases would be coming from that specific case maker? Can you comment on the watch hands? Do you know anything about the quality control of that particular brand? Have you ever held in your hands Benzinger or Jaeger Benzinger watch? You probably have not. So, your word, except for the part you repeated from me, isn't worth much. And you do have a university degree, so you probably know that calling something whack is not critique. Critique is a very, very specific, very specific word. It is, in fact, a philosophical practice, right? And I don't think calling something whack is critique. Hawkeye, John Davies says, what is whack, Marco? Are your dance moves? No comment. Hawkeye says, Marco is a salesman, not a watch expert a lot. And Jay Gray says, come on the stream, have a quiet one on the chat. Marco, invite him. He is invited. The link is there. He's more than welcome to jump on. He's always welcome. If he weren't welcome, just like other platforms do, I would have just banned him. Of course I don't. And there's no reason to get in your feelings, Marco. In the same way, if you think what you present is an honest critique, you should be in the same way receptive to the same kind of response, right? If you are willing to dish it out, you should be ready to take it. But can you take it? I don't think you can. And what I'm seeing from this kind of, a little sensitive approach, I think you're not mature enough. And by all means. Mookie says Grant Caliber is hiring. I'm sure it will be, thankfully, he's not in need of anything like that. I'm glad he's gainfully employed, unlike many people who troll these realms. I have respect for anyone and everyone who actually works for a living and who does their job with a certain kind of passion. And to a large extent, Marco does that, except I think if he knows the definition of passive aggressiveness, it's usually the kind of commentary that he gives in my chat. And again, since he's a little bit spoiled, he doesn't understand that when people reciprocate the same energy to him, it is what it is, right? You want to dish it, you should be able to take it. So if you feel like I come across as passive aggressive towards you, it's because of the kind of passive aggressive commentary you give. You want to give an honest critique of the watch, let's break it down to parts, just like they did on Instagram, and jump on the panel, and you'll tell me what you don't like about the watch. And I have said it before, you said it, that it looks exactly like the anniversary George Daniels watch, just with the date indicator and subsidiary seconds dial switched. So the dial design is nothing original at all. So with that being said, Jay Gray, you're talking to me? Don't be ridiculous. With that being said, again, subscribe if you haven't. Watch Talk and purely Watch Talk is what we welcome on this platform. No, no self-interested promotion, no salesmanship, but horological discussion. So if you are willing to support that kind of work, the links are there. Feel free to use PayPal for your contributions. And that's also my primary point of contact. That's Lord Hellespont V at gmail.com, Lord Hellespont V at gmail.com. I have a Cash App, and that's $LHVVV, $LHVVV. And if you want to become a consistent contributor for the cause of enhancing the quality and quantity of content on this channel, so I can free up more time, so I can dedicate more time to creating content, you can always click that link and become a contributor on Patreon. And any contribution is appreciated. So thank you for even considering it. Sundials. What is that? Where did we arrive at sundials? Thank you, Victor. Thank you for your kind words. And John Davy, you too, Jay Gray, Mookie, Watch Nicholas, Hawkeye, Marco. Thank you everyone for being here. I think I am getting ready to close. Of course, Tim G was there, Y2K was there, JB, Jake Brooks has been there from the very beginning. Benzi dropped by. I appreciate you. Bob dropped by in the beginning. Basil's dropped by in the beginning. I know a lot of East Coast people, of course, it was already too late for them. But hey, thank you for dropping by at least. Thank you for at least hitting the like button. That's already a lot for me. It means a great deal. You know, just the tiny bits of exposure that I get takes me to the next level. We were celebrating today, once again, independent watchmaking, but also my absolute small fry achievement of finally making 1,000 followers on Instagram from the scratch, with no with no particular support from any of the big channels on this little corner of social media, with no corporate pumping and dumping, certainly with no relationships to gray market profiteers, with no stakes in any of the industrial luxury conglomerates. I'm always here just for pure horological approach. I'm here for watch talk. I'm here to increase the knowledge of and passion for wristwatches. And I only have you to support me. And that's why I posted those links. So if you want to contribute, feel free. And that will help me, again, stay one step ahead while I work hard to get this platform to reach 1,000 subscribers. And after that, it is an important threshold, and I'm sure it will come in waves, and minimally it will allow me to get monetized. So thank you for being here. Thank you for celebrating with me once again. 1,000 followers on Instagram. I hope for the same soon on YouTube. So please share the link. Please spread the word. And once we get there, I'm sure we'll celebrate in style. I will, in fact, try to have something genuinely special, probably an extended live stream, probably something that includes special guests, maybe even a special location. I have to find a way of doing that. But certainly some interesting performances. You can look forward to that. And hey, if you want to help me unlock that achievement, once again, spread the word, tell all your friends. And if you want to help me before that, the information is included in the video description. It is in the crawling ticker, and I've just posted the links. In either case, I wish you a good night, or a beautiful early morning. I appreciate your support and presence, and I will see you tomorrow around the same time. Until then, I bid you adieu. Love you all. Take care.